was called the world's first pregnant man, and today he gave birth.
But the court has gone the whole way, said there is an absolute constitutional right to same-sex marriage.
Hurricane Harvey is pelting the Texas coastline.
There is an increasing attack on freedom of religion, speech, and conscience.
Welcome to the Issachar Hour, examining law, policy, and culture through the lens of the Judeo-Christian worldview to help you understand the times and know what you ought to do.
Welcome to the Issachar Hour. Good day. It's our pleasure to have you wherever you are, in the Caribbean, in the United States, United Kingdom, wherever in the world you find yourself. We're so happy you could join us today. Thank you also to those of you who sent us feedback about the program. We so appreciate the feedback. We would encourage you to keep sending feedback, and we provide a number and an email address to which you can send that feedback. So welcome again to the Issachar Hour. My name is Doreen West, and
good day.
I am with my husband.
Yeah, my name is Wayne West, and this is the Issachar Hour. Again, I just want to say good day, good night, good evening, whatever time, whatever your time zone, and welcome to the Issachar Hour. What are we doing today?
Well, first of all, I want to say it's 1 year now since we've been doing this program. Time really flies.
Wow,
it's a year. It's a year. We started July 2017, so it's a year since we started.
I didn't realize that.
And so the year has gone very quickly.
So if you've missed 1 year of programs, go and see if you can get them on the internet. We post them on the internet in due time, and we'll be replaying some of them as well. So look out for them.
So today we are going to be talking about the Christian Manifesto.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Christian Manifesto, that title is a title of a book as well as a talk given by a man called Francis Schaeffer.
Yeah.
And this is what we're going to be showing you today as well as discussing it. It's very important.
Yeah.
And when you consider that Francis Schaeffer made this book and this video, 1981, 1982, the early 1980s, that is more than 30 years ago.
It is.
It is amazing how accurate it is and how much it speaks to what is happening in our time.
Well, and that's because Francis Schaeffer understood
the times. He was a man of Issachar.
So
he was a man of Issachar, wasn't he?
He was able to analyze the time, understand the time.
And he knew what he had to do.
And he could predict what was going to happen, and therefore knew what was to be done.
So he was a
that's why he made the
original
manifesto.
Man of Issachar, I would say. And so it's very appropriate that we should talk about his book and his video today on the Issachar Hour. Now, before we go into Francis Schaeffer's talk, though, on this book, we should probably tell our viewers what a manifesto is. What is a manifesto?
Yeah, well, we can all think of election time.
Exactly.
You know, various political parties come with their manifesto. I think this manifesto may be a little bit different in that the manifestos of the political parties tend to be what they're going to do for you, how they're going to take heaven and put it on your plate so that you don't have to do any work and put your foot up and live good and so on. But other people have manifestos about how they analyze the situation they're in.
In fact, a manifesto is defined, as a definition. It is defined as a public declaration of your beliefs, your motives, and your intentions, your policy and your aims. It's a statement of your principles, and usually, in the political term, it's a call to action. It's to say, this is what we are about, this is why we are about it, and this is how we are going to go about it. That, in fact, is a manifesto. So it lays out the nature and the scope of the goals of either a party or even an individual. You know, some people think that only political parties have manifestos, but individuals have manifestos too. So if you are taking up an office like president or prime minister or student leader, you can also have a manifesto that describes your beliefs, your motives, your policies, and how you're going to get about what you want to get about.
And of course, groups have manifestos as well. Absolutely. Because like for example, we know of the Communist Manifesto, which was written by Karl Marx and Engels. And it was a layout of an understanding of policy, European civilization and how to go about how to deal with it.
No, the word manifesto is really an Italian word originally. I mean, derived from Latin. And what it means, you hear the word mani in it, that means like, that's come from like hand, right? And so manifesto, you could say it's showing your hand. A political party or an individual is showing their hand. They're saying, this is what I'm about.
Yeah.
They're not hiding it. They're saying, this is what I'm about. They're showing their hand.
Francis Schaeffer was saying that Christians needed to
show their hand.
Why?
Precisely.
Why did he say that Christians needed to show
our hand? So we're going to get to that,
hand?
why we need to show our hand.
Yeah.
Now, as you said, we think about that as a political thing, but it's not at all restricted to political movements, right?
I just want to say here to our viewers, I'm a Trinidadian, and I remember there was a clip so many years ago where somebody said that one of our political parties, the manifesto basically said they're going to take away the oil field from everybody and divide it up between all of we Trinidadians. It never happened.
Well, usually,
anyway,
yes.
Back to the manifesto.
Yes, manifestos, yes. And not every manifesto has the word manifesto in it, which is another point, okay? Not every manifesto calls itself a manifesto.
Yeah.
But anything that describes policies, intentions, motives, and so on is a manifesto. For example, we talk about the Communist Manifesto.
Yeah.
Karl Marx and Engels wrote that.
Yeah.
Yes, described. Then there's a Secular Humanist Manifesto 1 and 2.
I wonder how many people know of what is secular humanism at all.
Well, we're going to have to define that as well. Because
but they had a plan too.
They had a plan, a clear plan, motive, policies, intentions, goals, everything.
Yeah.
Clearly
I think
laid out.
it's important to lay that because people often know of the Communist Manifesto. People may have heard of it, even though they don't know what it's about. But people may not have heard about secular humanism.
Two versions.
Or that the fact that the secular humanists had in fact, they have a third revision of the manifesto. That the secular humanists have a manifesto and they have a third revision. And in fact, what we are seeing substantially
is the outplaying totally of the manifesto of the secular humanists. That's what we are seeing in our world today.
That's what we're seeing.
And Francis Schaeffer recognized way back in the 80s, in fact before that, that this is what was coming down the pipeline.
Yeah.
And he was warning Christians about that. He was reprimanding them too for allowing it to get so far, even in the 80s. Okay. Another manifesto that our viewers may know something more about is the Declaration of Independence, the American Declaration of Independence, 1776, 1776. That was also a manifesto. That was definitely a manifesto. And we know the phrase that people like to say from it, which is in the second paragraph. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that governments are instituted to secure these rights, not to give them, to secure them.
That's why they say that. That's why they have a Second Amendment, I think, which is that you have a right to bear arms just in case
the government turns tyrannical and tries to strip you of these very rights.
That's right.
So that's a manifesto, okay? That's an introduction.
It's not part of our constitutions in the Caribbean because our history is not the same. In the United States, they freed themselves from King George by their war of independence. So in America, they had a war of independence.
So the Declaration of Independence is a manifesto, right? So, okay, but the topic we're going to talk today is about the Christian Manifesto. Why did Schaeffer do this talk? Because he said there was a problem. Way back in 1980s, he recognized that there was a problem.
Yeah, and I have a feeling, I'm absolutely sure that the vast majority of Christians today recognize that there are problems, but they don't know why the problems exist and how to deal with it.
What to do about
and Schaeffer, in this book, the Christian Manifesto, has two components in the book: an analysis of the problem and as to how to act. In other words, how to respond to deal with the challenges.
And Schaeffer did not say there were problems, He said there is a problem.
A problem.
There is one problem.
And that problem always is the same thing from the devil. It's a lie. It's a lie about God. At the root of that problem is a lie about God.
So we tend to think about problems. So we say, okay, marriage is under attack, that's a problem. Abortion is being pushed, that's a problem. Transgenderism, that's another problem. All of these things are problems. But Schaeffer saw one problem. And the problem he saw was secularism, which is diametrically opposed from the root to Christianity and cannot survive together.
It's a worldview problem. It's what we call a worldview problem. The difference of how you see the world. What is the cause of the universe? Did the universe cause itself?
Is it material or is
there a God?
That's it.
And that's basically it.
And Schaeffer said this is the problem. And he said that because Christians back then worse, it would be worse now. I think if he were still alive, were not being salt and light in the public square.
Yeah.
They allowed this manifesto.
Salt and light, both in terms of conduct, but also in terms of ideas that they speak and articulate
ideas.
and understand.
Yes. They express, articulate, explain, defend, and teach.
Yeah. Ideas are the most important thing to know. Ideas last for eternity.
So he saw that there was one problem.
Ideas are more important than guns.
Right. And he says the problem is a concept of reality.
Yeah.
He says this secular humanism has a concept of reality, ultimate reality, which is manifestly different from the Christian concept of reality. And because of that, never the twain shall meet.
And the thing about it is that the secular humanists who have an idea of what the world is and how it ought to be, they are not evangelizing to get the world that way. No, they're using the courts to legislate it.
We come to that, right? So, Schaeffer said, "Look, there's a big problem," and he didn't. He said Christians have a part of the blame for the existence and the proliferation and progression
because
of this
as
problem.
he correctly says, when these people who wrote their manifestos, three revisions of the manifesto, and are implementing those revisions, like the third revision of the manifesto, via the judicial system and so on. Where were the Christians? Or where were the Christians? How did they respond? And his answer, unfortunately, is that Christian intellectuals and Christian leadership did not respond adequately. Did not
fulfill their mandate.
I must say that there are some persons in the United States who did take Schaeffer seriously and have responded in terms of American politics. But we get to that.
And thank God, we should say, there are a few persons in Jamaica who are doing that as well. And we really thank God for groups like Lawyers Christian Fellowship, for example, who have made signature contributions to our laws and public policies and continue to do so. So we thank God for persons like that. And we know that we have ADF, for example, in the United States.
That's the Alliance Defending Freedom.
And we know there are Christian Concern in the UK. So we know there are quite a few groups who now, maybe a little late, but they are doing something about it now. So, one of the things about the Secular Humanist Manifesto, which you are not surprised about, as he talked about the Garden of Eden, it is based on a tissue of lies. It is based on a solid tissue of deception. One of the first deceptions they use is the deception of separation of church and state.
Well, this is Christ said that the children of the world are wiser in their generation than the children of light. And this separation of church and state is the ultimate evidence that really the children of the light, who are the church, in Trinidad we use a term called sockeye, meaning that you're really stupid. I don't know if they use that equivalent term in Jamaica, where you're foolish. You're
gullible. You're
gullible, but our countries have nice term. I like the term sockeye. It means that you're really out of it. But the church allowed itself to be put in that category because the secular humanists knew that they would never be the majority. They would never have access to power per se.
No, numerical.
They needed the courts. You couldn't legislate it through the government. So you have to have the courts do your legislation for you. The secular humanists recognized that they had to have the courts give them the power to organize the world and make it the way they wanted to do. And that's precisely what they did. Right. They say the society is secular. There must be no Christian
input. Amazingly, persons in Jamaica tried to bring that here and said there is separation of church and state in Jamaica, and Jamaica is a secular country. Well, there's no such thing. Jamaica is no secular country. Even in the United States, some viewers might be surprised to know this, even in the United States, the term separation of church and state does not appear anywhere in the United States Constitution, yet it is being used to do all kinds of things.
Let me just back up, because I think it's important that our viewers understand that. The concept of a secular state is one in which religion has no input whatsoever. No influence in public policy and law. Now, Trinidad and Tobago never declared itself to be secular. Yet we hear the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Hossain, saying Trinidad is a secular state. I haven't heard
Does
I
it
heard
has-
one person out of Trinidad and
challenge
Tobago
it?
challenge that. I heard one person challenge that. Bishop Gill challenged that in a letter to one of the people. I haven't heard any other religious leader challenge that. As long as the religious community in Trinidad and Tobago
Remains
allows the Attorney General to get away with the fallacious claim that Trinidad is a secular state, meaning that religion has no influence on law and public policy, they have lost, which is precisely what the secular humanists have won. And we see Western democracies like the United States accepting that, gullibly accepting that, not challenging it, although it is nowhere in their constitution. And I want to repeat, it's not in the Trinidad and Tobago constitution. Trinidad and Tobago citizens, you challenge the Attorney General, Mr. Hussein, to say where in the Trinidad and Tobago constitution is there a phrase or any suggestion that Trinidad is a secular state. Now, I want to distinguish between a theocracy and a plural democracy. Just to say really quickly, a theocracy is a state that is run by priests on behalf of God. Like you see how Israel was in the old days before Saul became king, that's a theocracy. Nobody is claiming that Trinidad and Tobago or Barbados or Jamaica is a theocracy. It is those countries, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, and Jamaica, are what we call plural democracies, in that every idea is entitled to be represented for discussion in law and public policy. But more than that, those countries, because of their colonial past, the dominant worldview for law and public policy is the Judeo-Christian worldview. Trinidad and Tobago is not a secular state. Mr. Hussein is dead wrong.
Okay,
Back to
Mr.
you.
Hussein.
Back to you.
Okay, so the person's Schaefer was in the U.S., so a lot of what he said referred to the U.S., but it's applicable throughout the world because it's the same agenda all throughout the world.
It's what Mr. Hussein is doing in Trinidad.
Okay, so the persons who use this term, separation of church and state in the U.S., they are falsely using a term from the First Amendment to the American Constitution, which says Congress can make no law respecting the establishment of religion. Congress cannot make a law to say this religion is the state religion. There is no Church of the United States, like the Church of England.
Right.
They were running away from England because England had a state church. They did not want that.
And some of them didn't belong to it, and they were being persecuted.
They were oppressed because of England's state church. They ran away from that. So the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law regarding the establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. This means that every person is free to have their religion or have no religion whatsoever if they want. This is what the term said. And there was a letter written to a Baptist group that said there is a wall of separation between church and state.
I think that's by Thomas Jefferson.
Meaning to say the state must leave the church alone. That's what it meant.
That's right.
The state must leave the church alone. And now Francis Schaeffer makes this point excellently in his video. That ironically, the very thing that was meant to protect the church from the state is now being used to eject the church from any state matters.
No, I would like to rephrase it. The very thing that
was intended
to protect the church from the state.
So state interference.
The secular humanists
have twisted it.
Yes. Cook it up with all sorts of things, and the Christian people have eaten it and said, "Boy, it's true." So they have agreed with a lie. Now, once you agree with a lie,
have no say in public matters. So, does this mean that you have no prayer in school? In America, it's a big thing. You can't pray in school because separation of church and state. Nonsense. Doesn't mean that. Does this mean that no Ten Commandments displayed in a public place? No.
Well, it ought not to.
It does not mean that.
Well, it doesn't mean that, and it ought not to be
implied or interpreted to mean that.
But once you have activist judges who are sitting there willing to go with the program.
No, once people will get away with a thing, they get away with it. That's it. Okay?
Well,
so they are allowed to, they will get away with it. It doesn't mean, it means that there's no compulsion to any particular form of religion and that everyone is free to practice their chosen religion.
What I'm saying, that if you had judges who were there, who were looking at the law as written, not the law as they want it to be. The law as written, they would, if anybody came and said,
they would say, "Go away."
You could not have prayer in school. You would say that they would say it is not in the law. But if you have activist judges who are committed to the ideology, and if you have people within the legal profession who are willing to create, in other words, there's this concept that it's the Constitution
moving,
is a living,
document
breathing document.
to be
So
interpreted.
it is so alive that this, let us say that we are in a room. You can say by law that this is in fact not a room, it's an aeroplane, because the living, breathing nature of the document is such that if a lawyer, a legal luminary, and an activist judge get together and say, look, for the moment that we are in, we must say this is not a room in a studio.
It's a spaceship.
It's a spaceship. They legislate that and put you in prison if you don't agree with them. You know? Yeah, man. This is what secularism is all about.
Right. So I particularly want to emphasize on the deception point, because Schaeffer makes this point, and it is clear to us in our time a massive deception has been going on, where terms that meant nothing of the sort are now being used and imposed as if they meant exactly that. So to silence the church and to totally dismiss the Christian perspective from the public sphere. No. So that's secularism. Rejection of all religious influence and institution from saying anything in the public square.
And let me translate that into reality. It means that a place like Trinidad and Tobago, which has Muslims, Hindus, and Christians constituting maybe 90% of the population, those persons, maybe more than that, have been disenfranchised. You are no longer citizens. Your law and public policy will be made by persons like Mr. Hussein and judges like Justice Rampasad, which does not factor your opinion in at all. So the Trinidad and Tobago and so on will be operating at extremes. You have the extreme of a theocracy, and the other extreme is a secular state. In the middle is what Trinidad and Tobago is, which is a plural democracy. But powers that be, the power brokers like Mr. Hussein and Justice Rampasad, are denying that middle.
So the other thing, because we're talking about secular humanism, is that we must also define humanism.
Yeah, okay.
Because we mustn't mix up humanism with being humanitarian, which all Christians absolutely must be humanitarian. The gospel demands it, our Christian life demands it, the following Jesus' example demands it. Humanitarianism means that you absolutely hold to the humane treatment of your fellow human
Well,
beings.
and there is nothing like a good term, you know. If you coin a good term, you could do a lot of evil under that term. And the word humanism speaks to about human beings.
Yes, but it's what it says about it that's important.
Well, you see, the thing is that most people don't take time to think about that.
The other thing we must differentiate it from is the humanities. The humanities is really the study of human creativity, the things that humans produce by their creativity, which very creativity is a part of our being the image of God. So that's like your music, your literature, your art, your social structures, human creativity. That's humanities. And Faculty of Humanities ought to study that. Faculty of Humanities also does some other things, which we will talk about another time.
Yeah, which is a bit distressing, quite
But
distressing.
no, the humanism though, humanism is essentially the belief. It is a belief, by the way. Secular humanism is a belief. In fact, Schaeffer said it's a religion, and he's right. It is a belief, and it's a belief that man is the center of all things and the measure of all things. It all begins and ends with man. Man determines everything.
Yeah, and the reason for that is this, because if the universe is wholly material, which is unconscious material, then any knowledge, which obviously refers to conscious knowing, would be in the pinnacle of what is in the universe that can do that. In other words, the only being in the universe is man. It's human being.
Because they deny
so
God.
The only knowledge that could be in the universe
is human
is the knowledge that human beings have.
And the only mind is a human
but
mind.
Not only that, you know, the only
law
being that could determine what is right
or wrong. The only law will be human law.
Human law.
The only morality with that derived from human.
What they are saying is that there is no revelation from God whatsoever. Everything about knowledge, truth, morals begin and end with men.
Right.
But of course, it can't begin and end with all men.
Exactly, some men.
The power brokers will
decide which men. Okay.
Such like the people in the academy and the people in the judiciary.
Okay. So we have it's a rather long introduction, but I think it's important to say what secular humanism was, why Schaeffer made this book and made this video, because he saw what was coming down the pipeline of secular humanism. He made his talk after 1973, when Roe v. Wade had happened, and a few judges in the Supreme Court, 7 of them, had redefined reality with regard to the unborn and the rights of the unborn. Totally redefined.
They totally
For
redefined
the
rights.
entire America, they had redefined rights and created a right to abortion. And he saw this, and he knew other rights would be created. So this is why Schaeffer made this. And Schaeffer was I would say he was a brilliant Protestant theologian.
Yeah. Well,
he wrote a lot of books. I think he wrote
who was
maybe 20 odd books.
Who was Francis Schaeffer? He was born in 1912.
Yeah.
He was at the age of 17 he became a Christian. He was a Presbyterian minister. There was a time when there were Presbyterians who believed that God, who believed that there was a God. A lot of Presbyterians, I'm not saying all, but a lot of Presbyterians nowadays don't even believe there's a God. I don't hear. But there are Presbyterian leaders and bishops who don't believe that there's a God. So he was one of those from that era, and he understood. He understood what was happening. He wrote 22 books, like I say, different categories. The book that we are looking at would be which is the Christian Manifesto, would fall in the category of the truth about Western civilization. I think that's it. Now, what he did, he was married. He had 4 children. His wife shared his views, and she also wrote a lot of books as well. Edith Schaeffer. In Switzerland, sometime back in the 1980s, they started a ministry called L'Abri. That's French. L'Abri.
Means the shelter.
The shelter in Switzerland. And thousands of young Christian people went to Switzerland to spend time with them and to be informed. And in fact, but for that influence today, I think there would be no pushback,
no opposition to
against this secular humanist political and social movement that has completely replaced the Judeo-Christian view in law, public policy, and education. But so he has left his work.
Sterling legacy.
And I remember as a medical student picking up one of his books and trying to read it. It was so difficult.
Really?
That is one of the books that I just never completed. I never completed. But I am glad that in my old age I was able to.
I read one called He's There and He's Not Silent, which is a very good book. But we don't hear enough about him in our churches. We need to look at him more and study his writings more, because he was a man that had a vision. You know? He knew what was happening. He knew the times, as we said, and he knew what we ought to do. So he was a man of Issachar. So yes, we are going to look at his videos. So should we look at the first video?
Yeah, we look at the first video. I just want to say that really indirectly, I think Schaeffer has influenced me. I didn't know it at the time, but a lot of the ideas that I have come up with and thought that I discovered myself, actually it was other people who he had influenced who informed somebody. So we're going to look at the first video where he just introduces the concepts that we have been speaking to. Francis Schaeffer, a man Manifesto. Who understands the time, a man of Issachar.
Christians, in the last 80 years or so, have only been seeing things as bits and pieces, instead of seeing things which are gradually begun to trouble Christians and others also of goodwill, such as over-permissiveness, pornography, the problem of the public schools, the breakdown of the family, abortion, infanticide, the killing of newborn babies, the increased emphasis upon the euthanasia of the old, many, many other things. They have seen these as isolated bits and pieces, instead of understanding that they are the natural outcome of a change from a Christian worldview to a humanistic one. All these things and many more are only the results. We may be troubled with the individual thing, but in reality, we are missing the whole thing if we do not see each of these things and many more as only symptoms of the deeper problem. And that is a change in our society, a change in our country, a change in the Western world, from a Judeo-Christian consensus to a humanistic one. That is, instead of the final reality that exists, being the infinite Creator God, instead of that which is the basis of all reality, being such a Creator God, Now, largely, all else is seen as only material or energy, which has existed forever in some form, shaped into its present complex form only by pure chance. And I want to say to you, those of you who are Christians, or even if you're not a Christian and you're troubled about the direction that our society is going in, that we must not concentrate merely on the bits and pieces, but we must understand that all these dilemmas come on the basis of moving from the Judeo-Christian worldview, that the final reality is an infinite personal creator God, over into this other reality, which let me again speak of what it is, and that is the final reality is only energy or material in some mixture of form, which has existed forever, and which has taken its present shape by pure chance.
Yeah, so what Francis Schaeffer was pointing out there is the fact that there are two worldviews.
Opposing worldviews.
A worldview is a way of seeing the world, and it's...
And the whole world.
And at its, at the whole world. And at its core, because human beings are limited, we can never have perfect knowledge. There will always be assumptions and beliefs. And the two assumptions that have been at each other's throat for millennia.
Well, one has been more throat than the other one.
Yeah, in different ways. The one is that there is no God, which is atheism, which we discussed at length a week or so ago. And the other one is theism, which means that there is a God. Now, theism would manifest itself in many different types of gods and polytheism. But Christianity is the monotheistic religion, that there is one supreme God. And in order to have the complexity in living organisms, persons who are atheists have to find an explanation as to how unintelligent matter, how could dirt form itself into human beings? How could unconscious dirt form itself into complex human beings with eyes and ears and intelligence and so on? And for the atheists, that presented a challenge, because any sensible person would say there is no way matter could organize itself to produce fingers, fingernails, brains, eyes, teeth, tongue, and put them in the order that they are. And then the atheists got what they wanted. They got a theory called the theory of evolution from Darwin. Now, I tell people, no atheist today, nobody who believes in evolution can answer two questions. They can't answer it because it's not true. Here are the two questions. One, cite, in other words, name or list any organism that was produced by evolution. An example of it. In other words, show the transitions, that it was this way and it became that way. And then it became that way and it became that way, and eventually a brand new organism with brand new, what we call anatomy, new organs and physiology functions. They cannot. No, there is no scientifically verified example of an organism being produced by evolution like that. The second thing is this: cite the mechanisms by which such a transition could occur. They cannot cite it. It is not there. So what we are faced with now is that in order to say that evolution is true, the evolutionary biologists, the atheists, the secular humanists use what is called relatedness. They say that some organisms look like other organisms. But all of that is just the devil again. You know, people think the devil is foolish, but he is absolutely brilliant. He is using a truth that God has already laid out, which is what? That organisms are created in groups. The Bible says that in Genesis. So if you find organisms, you will always find organisms that are related to each other because they were created in groups. The evolutionary biologists, the secular humanists, and Satan himself, behind all of that, has used that truth to keep saying that organisms were evolved from each other. And the truth about organisms being related would remain true for extinct organisms as well as organisms that are living today. In other words, if you find organisms that lived many years ago and you find organisms today, there will be relatedness. Why? Because the Bible says so. So, Richard Dawkins, who is the high priest of atheism, said that Darwin provided a means for atheists to be intellectually satisfied, meaning that the complex nature of living organism can be explained by evolution. Not true. There is not a single example of transitions producing a new organism. None whatsoever. Anything that's out there is pure speculation.
So to try to link that to what we have been talking about, Francis Schaeffer and Human Manifesto, at the foundation of the two variant and naturally opposed and mutually exclusive views of reality that we have been talking about, which is secular humanism and the Christian view, at the foundational level, at the basis, the very beginning of the difference, total difference between them, while they cannot meet, they cannot overlap, they are mutually exclusive, is the fact of they have a different view, a different truth claim as to where it all began.
Absolutely.
In the secular humanist view, they say it all began with matter, energy, and pure chance.
That's right.
It all began there. And everything after that is a combination of those three: matter, energy, and pure chance.
Yeah.
Everything comes out there. That's their view.
Yeah.
And the Christian view is that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth and man and everything else.
May I actually just stick up in there? You know, when I sit down and think that sensible people hold the secular view, what I call sensible people, I mean people who are supposed to be intelligent, who are intelligent, hold the view that matter being acted upon by the laws of physics. But the laws of physics are what? Gravity, electromagnetism, etc. That those phenomena, the matter acted upon by those things, can produce consciousness, intelligence, decision making, complexity of that is absolutely ridiculous. But it is classic of what the Bible once again said: intelligence can become dark.
Right. So the reason why these two views of reality cannot be combined, cannot overlap, cannot share the public square. People must know this. They will not share the public square. And so if you take yours out and let the other one in, they're not going to let you back in there to share yours. This is what is happening in Western democracies in Canada and the United States now. The Christians have retreated, allowed secular humanists to come in the public square and say, let us share the public square. No, they will not share the public square. You have to get out.
I want to remind Trinidadian that is what the Attorney General, Mr. Hussein,
wants. Get out of the public
he wants
square.
The religious people, all the Muslims, all the Hindus, all the Christians. Your influence must not be there. Out.
Secular.
Leave it open to the atheists.
So evolution and the theory of evolution is at the foundation of that viewpoint. It is a flawed theory, which we all, any sensible person can see. The man in the street knows that matter, energy, and chance working together in some way produced everything we see. You remember years ago there was a video called Cosmos, and Carl Sagan, with a very nice voice, at the beginning of it said, the cosmos is all there was, all there is, and all there ever will be. And people just sat there, but he had not an iota of proof for that statement, but he said it.
In fact,
so that's an example.
I would have loved to have had the opportunity to ask Carl Sagan, but you, our listeners, could ask anybody who says that evolution is true and that or that living things start only from matter and energy. There's a simple question, you know. There's a thing called abiogenesis, which refers to the beginning of life. This is as distinct from evolution, which is how life gets its diversity. Life is what we call information technology. It involves the use of symbols for something. Symbols being used is a code. What do you mean by symbols? DNA is what's called a code, and there is a 3-letter sequence called codons. And the codons in DNA, those 3-letter sequence, correspond to or are symbols for amino acids in protein. Here is a thing you can challenge any professor of biology, any secular humanist, any atheist. Simple question. Cite which law of physics determine which codons are symbols for which amino acid. There is none. The only situation in which something can be used as a symbol for something else is if there is an intellect that decides to produce that code. And that's why DNA is a code, because the codons, what we call codons in the DNA, are symbols for the amino acids in protein. You know, the devil doesn't only tell lies, he suppresses truth as well. You will find that the scientists who are materialists will seek to suppress that truth. They don't want people to accept that DNA is a code. They would like to say it's like a code. It is a code. It is the signature of God in every living organism.
Right. So you understand now why they need that. They need that theory to take God out of things. And it is because of this removal of God and the insistence on matter, energy, and chance that they have a totally different view of God, of the universe, of man. And because of that, a totally different view of law and of society. And this is the point Francis Schaeffer is making. The two worldviews, the 2 points of view, the two views of reality lead to totally different and unmixable views of law and of society. Yeah. And this is what has brought us to where we are today. So I think that is where we are because of that. Yeah.
Now we're gonna take a look at the other video. Should we introduce that other video now?
Second video.
In which he
goes to humanism. Man has a measure of all things. Which leads directly from there being no God, intelligence in the world, the ability to make law, impose law, think about things reason only resides in man. So man becomes a measure of all things. So it's a natural progression. So the next video will show us man as a measure of all things, the essence of secular humanism.
The word humanism should be carefully defined. We should not just use it as a flag, as what the younger people might call a buzzword. We must understand what we're talking about when we use the word humanism. Humanism means that man is the measure of all things. Man is the measure of all things. If this other final reality of material or energy, shaped by pure chance, is the final reality, it gives no meaning to life. It gives no value system. It gives no basis for law. And therefore, in this case, man must be the measure of all things. So humanism, properly defined, in contrast to, let us say, the humanities or humanitarianism, which is something entirely different, and which Christians should be in favor of, both of these others. Humanism, being the measure of all things, comes naturally, mathematically, inevitably, certainly, if indeed the final reality is silent about these values, man must generate them from himself. So humanism is the absolute certain result if we choose this other final reality and say that is what it is. You must realize that when we speak of man being the measure of all things under the humanist label, the first thing is that man has only knowledge from himself, that he being finite, limited, very faulty in his observation in many things, yet nevertheless has no possible source of knowledge except what man, beginning from himself, can find out by his own observation. Specifically, in this view, there is no place for any knowledge from God.
Yeah, the thing about secular humanism is that, and we can't overemphasize this, it is absolutely dangerous. It is a dangerous philosophy. What it does, it puts power in the hands of what Friedrich Nietzsche would call the Übermensch. Now, Nietzsche was a philosopher who, at the time when people were saying there is no God, recognized that if the claim is made that there is no God, you're going to have to have some persons, some power brokers, who take the place of God, because we need to know where is up and where is down, and where what he called where the horizon is, and whether it's day or whether it's night. Somebody's going to determine that. Now, you will find that people are talking about tolerance and diversity and inclusivity and so on, but at the same time, some people are being fired from their job. Like Professor Bain was fired from his job because he merely spoke and gave evidence in a court of law. So inclusivity and tolerance are just words. They mean nothing. Because as persons embrace secular humanism, the Ubermensch, the overlords, the elite will determine what you can say,
what you can't,
or what you can't say, what is right and what is wrong.
what you can tell your children and what you can't tell your children.
And that's right. They will determine all of those things. So freedoms are going to go. And you will find that as the secular humanists, they're not going to be able to advance their agenda using
diversity and tolerance.
Politics. They won't be able to get the vote. They're not going to be able to get a vote to get
brute force is what has to rule once they were brute force.
And they're going to be exercising that brute force using the courts of the land.
Yes.
Using the court, it's the courts of the land that are going to get
and they know it, and they are prepared for it.
And they're prepared, and that is why, if you look at most of the decisions in terms of things like same-sex marriage or most of those decisions have come to the court. Now, eventually, as you change law, you change culture.
Yes.
And therefore,
and
eventually,
the people will vote for the corruption.
The people will embrace it. But in the meantime, in order to have it done,
law has to change.
And this is what we are seeing happening in Belize and in Trinidad and Tobago in terms of those judicial rulings.
And they're looking for that in India now, using Trinidad and Belize as precedents. They're looking for it in India, and then Jamaica, and then all over.
The Chief Justice of Belize used a decision by the United Nations Human Rights Commission, a decision which has no binding authority on anybody. It's merely an opinion. It's at most an opinion. It's a decision in a case called Tunem versus Australia. Well, Chief Justice Kenneth Benjamin decided to use that opinion, which has no binding authority, and bind the people of Belize. Why? Because he is advocating. He's an activist judge who is advocating the secular humanist agenda, that what is normal, what is good, is not going to be defined by what religious people say. It's going to be defined by what the elite in the Faculty of Law at the University of the West Indies and in the URAP group, what they determine to be right, and what other elite like themselves determine to be right. This is what is going to be imposed on the society through law. So secular humanism and its manifesto, which is its plan, its agenda for how to organize the society, is working. It's working in Belize, and then the judge in Trinidad used the precedent set in Belize.
And then the one in India.
And the one in India is going to use the one in Trinidad. And so these elite, activists, secular humanists, people are going to be imposing their will on the people.
And what our viewers and listeners must be clear is that secular humanists do not deny that there is right and wrong. Yeah. Don't get that mistake and say, okay, they say everything is okay, there's no right or wrong. No, they may pretend to do that for a while with relativism, but they absolutely believe in right and wrong, and they will enforce that right and that wrong using the courts initially, and they will lock you up if they think by calling evil good and good evil, they will make your good evil and lock you up, or punish you, kick out of your job, refuse your promotion. So they do believe in right and wrong, but they decide what is right and what is wrong.
What is right?
So be sure about that. But interestingly, secular humanism and its foundation didn't start now. Schaefer himself talks about a man, Oliver Wendell Holmes, who served in the Supreme Court of the United States in the 1930s. Yeah. And he adhered to Darwin's philosophies. Yeah. And he said, the Constitution is an experiment, just like life. People decide what is good for society at any given moment. You see that humanism? Who it says? People decide.
Stick up in. Yeah. This is the judge.
Supreme Court.
A Supreme Court judge.
Oliver Wendell Holmes, Associate Justice.
The Constitution is that?
The Constitution is an experiment, just like life is an experiment. People decide what is good for society at a given moment. That is humanism. He was a humanist, and he was back then, right? And so it has been happening for a long time. Yeah, secular humanism has a flawed view of the cosmos, the universe, society, and a flawed view of man. Yeah. Therefore, it produces a flawed law, flawed philosophy, a flawed way to organize society. In fact, it leads to anarchy in a way, and then the elites come and reestablish their rule as the rule of
what it leads to is nihilism. or nihilism, as some people say, meaning that there is no right or wrong. In other words,
but then they decide it's right or wrong.
And if you leave nihilism, if you
elite will come in and say what is right.
It leads to anarchy, that everybody can do whatever they want.
But they're not having that.
Nobody can live in a nihilistic and an anarchic state. So you've got to have the power brokers, the people who are the elite, the people who have access to the corridors of power,
brute force.
People in the United Nations, for example. And the way they're going to reorganize society is by setting up sets of rights which you better behave and listen to. If you don't give people those rights, you're going to be punished. So
because you'll be wrong.
That's right. The secular humanists have worked it out too. Having control of law, having declared that the state is secular, they are now going to make a set of new rights. So you see rights popping up all over the place. There's a right to burglary, a right to this, a right to that.
Abortion,
the only people who don't have rights are the people who they don't like. Or if those rights contend, the same activist judges who say there's a right to burglary are going to say that when you have come to bake a cake for same-sex marriage,
you don't have any right.
You don't have any right because that right trumps your right to refuse.
Yeah, so it's all wrapped up in
they are using the courts. And they are creating rights in order to punish you if you don't give people those rights. Yeah. So it's a well-crafted strategy, and we see it working out. So when we speak of man being the measure of all things, this is what we are leading to. This is the inevitable outcome of that. So, in conclusion, what have we been talking about today? Francis Schaeffer, way back in 1982, showed what was happening, and he thought some people dropped the baton. Yeah. He said Christian lawyers dropped the baton. Where were they when secular humanism was being touted as a basis for law? Yeah. He said the theologians dropped the baton. Yeah. He said the liberation theologians came in, and liberation theology is secular humanism dressed up in theological garb. Absolutely.
That's all it is.
Just repeat that. Liberation theology is pure secular humanism
dressed up in theological
instead of philosophical garb.
It is secular humanism with a clerical color.
That's right.
That is what liberation theology is. Non-believers, apostates.
Yeah.
It's secular humanism with a clerical color, and we have a lot of them in Jamaica.
And the Caribbean.
Yeah. Then he said the Christian educators, where were they? They failed to see the comprehensive nature of this agenda. And now, if you're a valedictorian in a college in America, you dare not go up and say, thanks be to God, I am valedictorian. You can't say it. They ban you. Right? Suppression of free speech. Bible spurs out. So he's saying to be salt and light, we have to engage the whole battle. It is one battle. Yeah. It is a battle to define reality. Yeah. Because from that, everything springs.
That's what Christ came for, to testify
to truth.
The truth.
And what Schaeffer said is that we are not just fighting for freedom or for our freedom. We are not just fighting for marriage and or sanctity of life. These are little tidbits of the reality, the whole comprehensive view of everything. Yeah. He said we are fighting for truth.
Truth. That's why in Isaiah, God said truth has fallen
in the public square and integrity cannot enter. Yeah. Truth is it. The foundational truth is the point of separation of Christianity and secular humanism. Yeah. What is the prime reality? Where did it begin? Is it matter and energy, or is it God? On that hangs the whole thing. Yeah. This has been the Issachar Hour. We're so happy you could join us. Please join us again next time. We'll continue to talk about the Christian Manifesto, the response to secular humanism.
It starts in the beginning. God created the heavens and
earth. It's all about truth.
It's all about truth.
One total reality. Yeah. Truth. Please
join us
again next time for the Issachar Hour. Thank you so much for being with us today.